Hey everyone, and welcome back to Don't Open That Door. I am Justin, the right-hand man.
God damn it. I was literally going to say the same goddamn thing.
Wow. I'm Nico, and I'm vitamin D, because I'm just everyone's little ray of sunshine.
And I'm Dan, wait, no, you can't be.
No. True fans will know just based off of that, but we are here today to review Vampire Hunter D. That's right, the 1985 version. This was directed by Toyoo Ashida and was based on a story and the characters and the world created by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Shout out to the legend. So this is from the 2015 remaster. This stars John Grimillion as the voice of D, Lucy Christian as Doris Lang, David Wald as Count Magnus Lee, and Shannon Emmerich as Dan Lang. So we open with Doris, a girl in the monster-infested lands known as the Frontier. She fights off a dinosaur demon, but is then attacked by a werewolf that also eats her horse. The werewolf rips off her cross, and she is then bitten by Count Magnus Lee, a 10,000-year-old vampire noble. He bites her, infecting her with vampirism, and then he departs. She desperately searches for someone to kill Count Magnus and free her from his bite. Eventually, she meets someone who might stand a chance. A person as beautiful as crystallized moonlight. She meets the hunter known as D. In case y'all were wondering, I fucking love this movie. Nico, what happens next?
D agrees to hunt Count Magnus, and he begins to defend Doris. That night, though, Count Magnus's daughter and servant, Ray, attacks Doris's homestead. D fights Ray, but Ray has the ability to warp space-time, and so when D stabs Ray, he ends up stabbing himself. Cue the air horns. D recovers from the blow, though, and is shown to be a Dhampir, which is a half-blood of human and vampire, and he's ready to continue the bout. But Magnus's daughter orders a retreat.
They knew they couldn't take D, right, Dan?
That's right, nobody can take D. So the following day, D launches an all-out assault on Count Magnus's castle. He fights past an onslaught of nightmarish creatures, but eventually falls into a pit deep beneath the castle. While in the pit, he is attacked by the snake-like Lamia sisters, and they fall into rapturous ecstasy as they begin to drain his life essence.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, they do.
While this is happening, Doris is captured by Magnus's minions and taken to the castle. D calls upon his vampiric ancestry and kills the Lamia sisters, grabs Doris, and escapes from the castle.
Yup, that sounds like some shit D would do. So afterwards, Ray heads back out to kill D and kind of re-kidnap Doris one more time. But Magnus, the Count, sends two minions to give him the Time-Bewitching Incense.
Time-Bewitching Incense.
A magical item that will help him defeat D. Greco, the mayor's son, overhears, and unbeknownst to Ray, Greco switches the Time-Bewitching Incense for a fake. Ray kidnaps Doris's daughter to lure D to a fight. D shows up, chops off his hand, and rescues Doris's brother. This is because, again, Ray was trying to fight with a fake Time-Bewitching Incense. Meanwhile, Greco takes the real Time-Bewitching Incense and attempts to kidnap Magnus's daughter, who is currently with Doris. But Dan, Doris's brother, ends up shooting him and he falls off a cliff. D and Doris let Magnus's daughter go. So a lot happened there, but D just kicked a whole bunch of ass, and Dan shot someone. Not our Dan, the Dan from the movie. But they're of similar
You don't know,
mind.
though. Our Dan might have fucking shot someone.
We're of similar badassery.
Similar.
Exactly.
But Nico, why don't you carry on?
So Ray finds Greco and kills him, taking the real Time-Bewitching Incense. No, you're supposed to do it. Damn it. Do it with me, fuckers.
All right, fine. Go ahead.
Ray finds Greco and kills him, taking the real
Time-Bewitching
Incense.
Incense.
He then uses the magical item to defeat D, staking him through D Heart, killing him and taking Doris to the Count Slayer. Fortunate for D, this man has a fucking sentient left hand, y'all. I don't know if you were hip.
Oh, shit.
And then the left hand casts a spell, reviving D just because he fucking can, and goes to rescue Doris and kill the Count. So D goes and attacks D Count Magnus with grace and beauty no living being could match. Get it? Because he's half vampire.
Oh.
And attractive.
Oh.
But Magnus responds with psychic fucking powers. Oh, Lord. Magnus seems like he has the upper hand, but D calls upon his vampiric ancestry. Vampiric ancestry, perhaps even, and manages to overpower Magnus by going through the Dracula version of Ancestry.com, yeah, bitch. No, just kidding. He stabs him through the heart. Magnus looks at D one last time and realizes that his gorgeous countenance bears quite a resemblance to Dracula, the sacred ancestor of all vampires. Magnus begins to ask D about his heritage, but he can't finish, and his castle crumbles around him as he is killed.
Take us home, Dan.
So the movie ends with Dee escaping the castle with Doris and her little brother Dan. They bid him farewell as Dee glamorously rides off into the sunset. His blade will surely taste the blood of the nobility once again. The end.
Y'all know I wrote this summary, audience, and yeah, I fucking love this movie. And D. So let's just go ahead and let's break this down piece by piece. So first up, the visuals, and I'm gonna lead. This is an anime from 1985, so it kind of bears a lot of the hallmarks from that era. I will say that the kind of character art and design, especially the stuff that's on the box and everything else, that's done by, Dan, I always fuck up this name. Is it Yoshitaka Amano? The Final Fantasy art person? Is that how you say the name?
Yeah.
Apologies if I butchered that, but I believe that's how you say it. I mean, that art always looks fucking cool, really badass. And the movie itself, I mean, one thing about it is I appreciate the designs and how things happen. So there's a scene where Ray, the minion of the Count, is killed, and you literally see his head explodes, and his eyes, his eyeballs, and his brain just explode everywhere. And I mean, there were certain scenes when I saw in this movie, I was like, Jesus. Even though it is something from 1985, I just adore the creativity that goes into it. But Dan, I want to know your thoughts.
I pretty much agree with you. I think it's very much a 1980s anime in both audio and visuals. And yeah, I mean, the gore kind of caught me off guard. First time I watched it when I was like, I don't know, 13 or something.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, damn, people are exploding. And, you know, people get cut in half and you see their innards like getting split
Become
open and
outwards.
everything. Yeah. It's cool though to watch, you know, and I don't know, I liked it. I liked the visuals. The one thing that that I didn't really like, and it really only bothered me the first time, is the first time you see Dee's eyes. Like the first couple scenes you see him in, he's wearing this hat. I mean, he's always wearing a hat, but like his eyes are covered by shadow. And then when you finally see his eyes, they're like too big and bright and they just look kind of goofy on him. And then you kind of get used to it. But at first it's just like, oh, what the fuck? Other than that, I mean, I personally like it. As long as you kind of get past the, yo, this is really fucking 80s, I like the visuals.
All right. Nico, I mean, D is huge, isn't he?
Yeah, D's pretty fucking big, and I will say that I really do enjoy the design of everything in this movie, just in terms of just the creativity of it. There's a lot of usages of different sort of, I don't want to say like inspirations, but like everything, it doesn't look like everything is sort of like drawn all from the same source in terms of like, oh, these are all demons from Abrahamic mythology or something. Like it looks actually pretty, like it has a wide roster of different sort of influences, I guess you could say. But I have to add, I'm not the biggest fan of the visuals. I'm sorry. It is definitely something from, 1985. And like you both said, it does show, but I just found it distracting at times with how either, not the frame rate's not the word, what am I looking for? Just like some of the line art wasn't very clean at all, and I found it just not very cohesive at times in general. I'm sorry.
Better apologize. D's about to come for you, bro. But no.
D's nuts.
Oh my God.
Second time.
I can see that, especially I mean, Nico, like you said, you hadn't really watched like a ton of like 80s anime, right?
I don't know what I've watched that is specifically from the 80s, to be honest with you.
I feel like you would know though. Like the '80s have a very
I'm positive that I've seen a lot, but I can't think of
yeah.
anything on the top of my head besides from obviously like this.
I feel like this is pretty representative of a lot of 80s anime, in my opinion. Like, I don't really think this necessarily like stands out a crazy amount in terms of the animation, but I don't know. I think Nico, in terms of what you were talking about, is kind of just like the not frame rate, but just kind of like perhaps the kind of like amount of frames and like back then they didn't have computers to fill everything in. So they
No,
literally
I,
had
I
to
know. I'm fully aware. It's just like some of the, and like I said, frame rate isn't the right word. It's, I guess it does have to do more with the actual like animation itself and the way just the line art sort of like blends together. I'm not a visual artist or an animator, so take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt there, but I do still contend that I don't think the visuals are that great. I'm sorry. I like the spirit of the visuals, but like on paper.
I'm still gonna poison you in your sleep.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty much what it is there. But Nico, did the audio fare any better for you?
Oh, yeah, no, the audio was perfectly fine. That's something that oddly, and I don't know why this is necessarily, but when it comes to anime, I'm a lot more willing to excuse the audio of things more so than visuals. I think, in particular, the voice acting, just because it's almost nostalgic for me to watch a bunch of really old anime and listen to just absolutely horrendously done riff after riff on what's supposed to be dialogue but ends up sounding like, I don't know, used car salesman at times. Like, I like that kind of stuff, but all that to say, the audio is fine. I have genuinely no problems with it.
I do want to point out, and this could just be me, there was a couple tracks that they have, and there's like some bass in those tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was playing it, the bass was out of control sometimes, bro. I was like, yo, this bass is like really, really doing a
Yeah,
number on me
no,
right now.
same here. I will say that. So perhaps the mix is not
Oh, you
great, but
watched the bass boosted version of this movie?
Oh, did
huh?
I? Did I? Did I really?
Bass boosted remix.
Tell us about the audio, Dan.
I actually liked it. I thought these 2015 remastered, redone voice acting was actually pretty good. There were definitely some pretty 80s sound effects, though. You know, with all
Uh-huh.
the battle scenes and the and everything was super 80s, 90s kind of sound effects, which is great. I thought the music was kick-ass too. I thought it was pretty cool. A lot
oh, yeah,
Yes.
the
of
music rules.
yeah, a lot of like classic 80s synth sounds, and I don't know how many times we've said 80s already, but it's probably going to
Ugh.
keep coming up. But yeah,
Number's gonna go up into the 80s.
Yeah.
It
All
probably
right. Cool. Cool. Let's get really down to it because I cannot wait. So first off, how do we feel about the power and portrayal of vampires in this as opposed to other media? And not just, their physical powers, but their attitude and everything else. So Nico, specifically, how do you feel about the powers of the Count?
I feel like it does definitely feel more sort of like anime-y in general, if you know what I mean. Does that make sense when I say that?
I think kind of.
Elaborate, good sir.
So, whenever there is a portrayal of vampires, we have often just the first thing that comes to mind is, Dracula, the book. And in modern times, I think we have a lot of like pop culture references that come to mind as well, like, Vampire Diaries, Twilight, and all of that. But this definitely feels like an anime distinctly. Like the Count is, foreboding. He appears imposing and just has a sort of sense of drama to him that is really, really helped by just the medium here. The fact that this, again, is an anime, if that makes sense. And I think it does.
All right. I think for me, he was like a very, very classic vampire, except in one way. dude had like eye beams and psychic powers that like those aren't super classic things that are attributed to vampires. So I thought that was kind
I
of
thought
interesting.
vampires did have some kind of latent psychic abilities, at least with suggestion and stuff.
Yeah, like hypnotic suggestion, sure, but this man was over here like bashing somebody up against a wall and then exploded his head. I'm just saying that's not super typical. But aside from the count, I thought that, D is very much a Dampier. There's this time bewitching incense.
Incense.
Time bewitching incense.
Yes, the time bewitching incest. And that
Time bewitching
basically
incense.
Whoa.
yeah, and that basically like it really mashes up vampires
That cannot be the title of the episode.
and like it messes up D too. Not as bad as it messed up another vampire, but it messed him up pretty bad too. He also has a weakness to getting staked through the heart, which most of us have, but it's like super effective on D, who like normal moves don't hurt. So I thought that was pretty cool as well. But I wanted to change gears here a little bit and also talk about kind of the attitude of the vampires, specifically the nobility. Because, in a lot of media, the nobility, we talked about this when we saw Blade with Ish, but the nobility are always thinking they're better. They're lording over people. And, Count Magnus says, like, well, I don't kill them. I take one woman every 50 years. That's not too much to ask. And the daughter thinks she's so far above everyone. And Dan, I want you to talk a little bit about the daughter. I mean, we kind of find out a truth about her. What is that?
Yeah, so she really disdains humans. She hates humans. She hates half-breeds. And we find out near the end that she is a half-breed. And she finds out too. She didn't know. And she's so proud that at the end, she's willing to die rather than admit that she's half-breed. She can't believe it's true, and she sticks to the sort of noble creed that Dracula had put out. Their sacred ancestor had said something like, I can't quite remember, but she ends up dying because that's what a vampire is supposed to do in the case that she was presented with. And Dee was even like, well, no, you're a Dampier. You're not a vampire. Don't fall victim to this noble hubris, and she's like, no, I'm a pureblood. I don't believe that I'm half-breed. And she walks into the destruction and dies. I think that can kind of be applied to the real world too. There's a lot of people who are too proud to admit, a certain thing about them or whatever, and they fall on their sword. But yeah, definitely that, and of course the Count have this very disdainful attitude about everyone but vampires. And I think the Count even says that they rule over humans. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did I catch that? Yeah. They
He
make
did
like
say
a
that.
small remark, but yeah.
All right, yeah. So I think a lot of the powers are kind of on track with what we see, but there's also something else that's on track with what we kind of know about vampires, and that's the whole kind of sexualization and vampires' role within that. So, Nico, I want you to talk a little bit about that and what's kind of the portrayal here.
This is a movie that there's a lot of sexual content in this, insofar as there is content that is either sexualized or has the presence of something that is being sexualized. And a lot of that comes through, again, with the sort of like the Lamia. Now you've got me questioning how to say it. Christ. With that serpentine woman monster whose name begins with L. That's so many more syllables than necessary.
And ends with Amiya.
And ends with Amiya. Oh, God, this is getting worse and worse by the second. I think that a lot of that comes through in the monsters in particular, maybe even more so than the vampires, just because, again, this is an anime, and when these characters that are poised to be like the big bads, I think they have a little bit more that they have to do as a character necessarily than be like a heartthrob or have necessarily some sort of impetus having to do with romance, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, all right. And Dan, I want you real quick to talk to me about Doris. I mean, a lot happens to her that's kind of, sexual in nature. First off, her outfit itself. She's wearing what I call like an invisible skirt because, sometimes it looks like she's standing there like straight up in her drawers, bro. Like,
Yeah, there's time where D had her slung over his shoulder and it's just like panty shot, and you're like, oh, all right.
all right, there you go.
Okay.
And there was like one time where a creature was like ripping off her cross or whatever like that, and like ripped off like a piece of her dress, and it was
Stopped
like
to grab a titty.
it was like instant titty.
Yeah, literally in the middle of attack. You can see like there's a frame where he pauses and he's like, "Bah!" And then he just like selectively claws around her shirt so that her tit can come out.
And then literally the very next like scene is back in, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
covered up,
shirt's
you know? It's
fine.
like, okay, all right.
That's always interesting. But I wanted to talk to you about a trope that may not necessarily be present in every movie, but goddamn, if this isn't a Vampire Hunter D thing. I mean, Doris pretty much falls in love with D, like straight
Yeah.
up. I don't think D has said maybe like even 20 words to her. I mean, he is that beautiful and gorgeous and great. But
is.
how do you feel about that as kind of like a plot element? And how do you feel about the fact that D, I don't know if he potentially harbors any feelings for her or if he just stops himself from ever feeling anything ever, or tries to at least.
I think he just kind of stops himself from feeling anything ever. But this is where I kind of think that the books, the light novels, kind of sexualize him a little bit more. So, mostly because I think we get more description about him and the very poetic nature of the descriptions. Whereas in the anime, you can tell he sort of oozes this sort of like aloof nature that, you know, very, I can't describe
He's
it
a
very
bad
well,
boy.
but yeah, essentially. And, you know, it's interesting because when near the end, she's like, you know, take me, bite me, whatever, I don't care anymore. And, you know, he kind of struggles with that for a minute. And it's almost more, from his perspective, it's almost more of a, not romantic at all, just very
Carnal?
carnal, yes. It's very carnal, and it's just, you know, he forces himself to stop. And like you kind of mentioned, I don't think he feels anything about her at all through the whole movie. But at that point, it's just nature comes out, and, you know, he has to bite her, but he stops himself.
Nico, I wonder if there's not, you know, if that's maybe not a window into how lonely his life is, because he kind of goes around from place to place. And I want to transition here into asking you this. What kind of a hero is D? Because he seems so lonely. Like he goes from place to place. Everyone hates him because he's, you know, half vampire. He helps people and then he just leaves. So what kind of hero is he?
He reminds me of, honestly, Geralt from The Witcher. Both in terms of the, I almost said the anime depiction, the Netflix series depiction, and from the third one that came out years ago. In that game / series, you know, Geralt is a Witcher who's sort of like corrupted by a whole bunch of rituals and stuff, kind of similarly tabooed in a way that vampires are. And because of that, I think that he fits pretty easily into a sort of like anti-hero role, particularly given his proximity to a, you know, just more monstrous aspect of the world that they live in.
That's interesting. In my opinion, I think that D is actually pretty squarely a hero. I don't really put him so much in the anti-hero thing because I feel like D does the right thing. Always. Like when Dan is having troubles, he tells Dan, he's like, hey, listen, it's okay to cry. It's okay to handle your emotions however you want to, but don't cry in front of your sister because she only needs support right now. And, you know, the Hand makes a ton of remarks about how D is just trying to like, you know, he's like, oh, you're going soft, or like you're doing this, that, and the next. I guess from my point of view, I didn't really see too much about D that would cast him as like a anti-hero. I feel like he's very much like a, I came to do my job, I'm going to do my job, and then I'm going to leave. I just think he's like really lonely, I think is like probably one of the best ways to put him because it's literally just him and his hand. Like his hand is his only companion in the entirety of everything. It's just his hand.
There are a lot of people who are lonely out there with just them in their hand.
This is D's left hand. And I'm glad he made it his left hand. So, Dan, you know, what kind of hero do you think D is? And I kind of want to look at this through the lens or framing of kind of the classic cowboy or samurai movie, because, you know, there are movies out there where, you know, for example, oh, the town is plagued by an evil bandit leader. So they bring in a cowboy or they bring in like a samurai to protect the village, but this person is, they feel at least like this is a horrible person. So he's never really trusted or welcomed within the village. I mean, can we see echoes of that, do you think, or am I reaching here a little bit?
No, I think you're totally right. I think the sort of once the people find out he's a Dampier, they kind of get this distrust. And actually, even before then, they're like, there's something off about this guy. He's not a bad guy, but he's not necessarily a good guy either. And you're right. He just kind of comes, does his shit, and then leaves. And I wouldn't quite say he's lonely, but he's definitely a loner. And I think he wants to be alone. And for better or worse, and I think that he doesn't want to be around people, and he thinks that being the son of Dracula, and not just a vampire, but the Dracula, that every vampire, they call him the sacred ancestor. I think that kind of, well, he definitely views it as a curse. So I think he tries to stay away from people and is purposely a loner. So yeah, I don't think he wants to spend much time with people.
Nico, really quick, the fact that D tries to suppress his vampire side, he doesn't really call on his vampire powers unless he's like really in deep shit. And oftentimes it's more of a reflex than him calling upon it. What does that say about his personality that he's trying so hard to suppress that side of him?
I think there's a lot of shame there in the fact that he is sort of like cast with all of the other vampires and Dampiers who I, again, haven't read the light novels, but I'm going on the assumption that it sounds like in this world, vampires are just wholesale bad, right?
For the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's more alluding to just sort of like those sensibilities more than anything else.
All right. So, real quick, before we get to something else, I want to talk about the monsters that D fights. So, particularly when he invades the castle for the first time, we see a ton of really cool kind of monster and creature designs. I mean, Nico already kind of talked about the Lamia. Lamia?
Lamia.
I don't know. But that is one creature that he fights. I mean, there's also a werewolf that pops up at the start. There's a fucking brontosaurus dinosaur demon that's at the start of this movie. There's kind of a cloud that comes down and like dissolves. I believe it's an acid cloud that comes down and dissolves body parts and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And like it almost gets D. So, I mean, where the fuck did these creatures come from? In terms of like creativity, can you guess? Like, is this just like mythology? Do you think some of this shit is like OC?
That's kind of what I was getting at with my earlier part about like the inspirations. I think that a lot of this is really just wholly original with some nods, of course, to classic like vampirism stuff. We've got the fangs and just they look like fucking vampires, but everything else is really fun and vibrant and honestly kind of wacky at times. There are those what are the names of those big tentacly fuckers? Did they ever get a name? The ones that kept coming out look kind of like starfish almost. Did those ever have a name?
No.
Okay,
no.
well, all of that to say that I think the design really is just original entirely. It's unique. It's really, really nice.
I think it definitely gives the movie a more sci-fi kind of feel to it too.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause a lot of these creatures some of them almost seem like aliens. Like there's the ones that are definitely like demonic, but some of them just like look like aliens or something that you'd see in like a Star Wars movie, right? When they land on a
Right.
new planet and you just see these just random aliens there. Like it almost gives that kind of vibe to it a little bit. Especially I think with like the first time we see Dan, he's defending his farm. Like, he's got this little like laser gun kind of thing and he shoots the acid cloud and you see like a couple other creatures and stuff. And like I feel like that I can almost see that out of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. So, real quick, not to give like a boatload of spoilers here, but this movie is based on the first Vampire Hunter D light novel. And there's a whole bunch of these light novels, and they go really deep into the character of D. The one, to me, the biggest difference probably is D doesn't talk in the books, like ever. Like, he might occasionally say something, but D never speaks. And I think the sequel does a better job of kind of portraying D as he is in the novels versus this one. In this one, he talks a lot more. He has like one or two quips, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing is the portrayal of the Hand. The Hand in this movie, he doesn't quite seem evil, but he's like a lot less helpful. And in the book, the Hand is always worrying about D. The Hand's always like, dude, don't do this. Like, you're going to get hurt. Or like, dude, don't do that. And like, I don't even know where the Hand comes from up to now. But also, and Dan was kind of talking about this earlier on, I really like the novels because they give you a ton of backstory about everything that's happening. So the random creatures that appear in the frontier, they're all pretty much designs of the nobility. Like the nobility made these creatures. And they like ruled over this frontier land and over the land in general for like a fucking long time. And then, you know, they died out. But it was kind of like they chose to go. They chose to die out. And that's why D tells the noble, he says, all the real nobles are gone. Because all the people who had like honor and stuff like that, they all died. And the words are actually in the phrase, you know, such transient guests. Because that's the quote from the book that, you know, it's a quote from Dracula. And, you know, people kind of theorized who Dracula was referring to when he spoke of such transient guests. But in reality, he was talking about vampires and that they were such transient guests and that humans would stay longer. And they kind of hinted it in the movie a little bit, but they kind of also mess it up because D kind of uses it as an insult. He basically tells the Count, he's like, all the real nobles are gone. The rest of you are such transient guests. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's what Dracula said to start with. So yes, like you're correct, but it's not really meant to be used in that kind of way. Also, and this was like a very, very minor thing that kind of got on my nerves. But when the Hand brings D back, he has to do a lot more in the book.
Yeah, doesn't he have to like absorb the elements and everything too?
In the movie, it makes it seem like the Hand could just bring D back whenever he dies. But in the book, it kind of outlines it that it was a very specific set of circumstances that allowed him to resurrect D. Because he had to get like fire, water, wind, earth, and blood. I believe that's what he needed to kind of resurrect D and like heal him back from getting staked through the heart. Because D was like done. But yeah, I mean, that's just what I feel about the books versus the movie. But all in all, this movie did actually a fairly decent job, I think, of portraying the major elements in the book. Also, real quick, to Dan's point about everyone falling in love with D, that's just how it is in the books. Like D, and I was jokingly writing all this stuff when I said how gorgeous D is and whatnot. Like those are all phrases from the books. I don't know how, you know, Kikuchi Sensei does it, but he basically never runs out of ways to say how beautiful D is. I'm like 20 books deep, and this man is still coming up with new ways to talk about his countenance that's shown like the stars in the night sky or whatever else. Like, he'll do that, and then he'll also talk about like attacks. They go really into detail about how attacks work. Because it'll be like he swung his sword with the force of like Mach 3 winds, but D dodged. How could it have been unless D was moving faster than Mach 3 winds or whatever else? Like they'll go into that kind of detail. And it's like, all right, bro, I get it. D's badass. And to be fair, I'm going to pose this question to the room. Is D like a Gary Stu, basically like a Mary Sue? Like, is he just fucking OP as shit? And he just walks in here and stomps everything?
Yes. And the scene that did it for me, that told me how badass he is, they don't even say anything. Nothing else happens. They don't make it a big deal. But there's this big bonfire, and he cuts through the fire. And the fire goes out. Like, he cuts his sword through the fire, and the fire's like, all right, fuck it, I'm dead now. And it just dies. And like, yep, you're a badass, D.
Yeah.
This man said, fuck thermodynamics.
And this is the one thing, D is like OP as fuck, but so is everyone else that he fights, which is why I find it to be entertaining. But yeah, like up against like a normal ass dude, yo, D would stomp anyone. It's not even a question. Also, his hand is hacks as shit. Yep. So they show it one time in the movie, but yo, D's hand can literally like suck up and absorb like magic spells. That's broken as fuck. Cause like, what are you gonna do? You can't move faster than him. You can't beat him. And the left hand like absorbs spells. Like there was this one enemy in the movie that like fucked up the doctor by like coating him in spiders. And D just like, his hand just eats up all the spiders and is like, yum. I'm like, oh shit. All right. I guess you win. Real quick before we get to the, I can't wait for this. What would you do? Nico. All in all, Doris, how do you feel about the portrayal of Doris in the movie?
She's fine. The part that I feel like you're asking me about in particular is the scene where she's like, take me, it's okay. You know, use me, use my blood or whatever. Is that what we're getting at?
That's projection. I was asking about the whole movie.
Okay, all right. Then, well, yeah, like I said, she's fine. Honestly, I think she's pretty forgettable alongside the rest of the cast. In comparison to the rest of the cast, sorry.
Take that back. Oh, never mind. You did take that back.
All right. Well, it was done. So now, I struggle with this a little bit, actually. But it's time for the what would you do? So, let's say that the three of us are on the frontier, and it's got a vampire out there. So, there's no vampire hunter D. It's just us. Let's say, like the vampire came and, Nico, the vampire bit you, let's say. And you gotta kill the vampire now, otherwise you're gonna get fucked up. Okay. What would your plan of action be to get back at the vampire? Would there even be a chance in this world for a human to kill a noble?
I mean, at this point, honestly, I'd just vibe. I wouldn't even fight back. I would just be like, all right, cool. I've already got, fucking celiac. I've got this other shit. I'm allergic to this, that, and the rest. Fuck it. Why not be a vampire? I'm down. Take me. You weren't expecting that, motherfucker.
Well, I mean, I guess being a vampire would erase a bunch of that for you, so you'd be straight.
Yeah,
but
it'd be rad as hell. I could finally eat calamari.
All right, so Dan, okay, how about you? What would you do?
I would try to fight back, but I don't think I'd really have a lot of hope. I would think I would try.
All right, what would be your plan of attack to kill the Baron, or not the Baron, the Count?
I would wait for him to summon me, and then I would try to, sneak attack him. Stake him through the heart when he's celebrating his win.
Very true. Very true. I feel like I'd have to do the same way, but I feel like I'd get killed by one of the creatures in the frontier first before I even got to the thing. I think the acid cloud would come for me. I'd be like, fuck. I don't know, because the vampires are somewhat weak to crosses. They don't like them.
True.
That's why they kept removing her cross. So I might have to walk up in there with a cross, a crossbow, if you will. And the cross on the crossbow. You know about that? Yeah. Cross-shaped arrows.
Call that a crossbow.
Oh, it's just wait till bloodlust.
I know. I fucking know. And I do have to say to the audience, so this movie's good, but fuck me. Bloodlust, which is the sequel to this movie, that shit'll rock your socks. That shit will rock your fucking socks. But speaking of, let's talk about the critic review. Oh, I did want to say this as well to the audience. If anything we've said here has kind of inspired you to go watch this movie, big fucking epilepsy warning. Holy shit. There is a scene in this movie where it's a straight up fucking strobe light. So
yeah,
if you have problems with that, don't fucking watch it because it will fuck you up. Now to the critic review. You know what? Not bad for an anime. Not bad at all. So this movie is sitting at a 78% from the critics and a 78% from the audience.
Wow.
All things in balance.
Is this the first time that's happened?
I think so.
Wow.
I think so.
I think it's gotten close before, but I think this is the only time it's been the same.
Been fair and square. So I want you guys to go ahead and give me, your score, maybe your favorite scene in the movie, and general thoughts. Dan, start. It's you.
General thoughts, I like this movie a lot, though I think part of it is nostalgia for me. I think that when you kind of look at it objectively, kind of like what Nico was saying back on, near the beginning, I think that this movie and other 80s anime kind of fall into less than wonderful animation, and the artwork is great, but the animation specifically there can be some gaps there. And I think that sometimes the movie moves a little quick, and I think that's kind of the same way for a lot of 80s anime too, where the scenes jump and then it's kind of oh wait, we're here now. Whoa, that, time skip or kind of thing, which once you get used to it, I think is fine. I think objectively it's a great movie, but it has a few pitfalls. My favorite scene, I think, is when D cuts the fire, because that was just, that was badass. I am actually right there with everyone else. I'm 78 for me.
All right. Nico, how about you?
So this is a rare case on the pod where I am the odd man out for the opposite reasons. I don't like this as much as y'all. I'm sorry. I will echo Justin's statement about Bloodlust, though. Bloodlust fucking whips. But anyway, this is a fun movie. And as anime goes, it is by no means a heinous offender or anything. And, you know, to Justin's credit, a lot of it is representative of the time. But just in terms of the sort of like the pacing, the editing, and a general lack of explanation for a lot of what was going on, which again is the case in a lot of 80s anime, but it just didn't really flow as well for me. I was still just completely bewitched by the design of everything and just the fun that the movie is, though. All of that to say, I am going to give this a 65.
All right. So, what's your favorite scene, Nico?
Oh, right. My favorite scene is also when he got to fire. I'm not going to lie.
So, from my perspective, I think this is a real kind of classic joint, real staple. But, and looking at this kind of with the nostalgia goggles off, there's a reason why so many people, myself included, really got into Vampire Hunter D with Bloodlust and not this. Like, there's a reason why this is not like kind of the seminal Vampire Hunter D movie that everyone talks about, because it's not. In a lot of ways, to me, it feels like a first attempt, a first try. I don't know too much about the budget behind this, but they actually reused when the hand is eating dirt, they reused the sequence of the hand eating dirt about 3 times. I shit you not. Like the same exact hand digging up the dirt and doing whatever else, they did that like 3 times. So clearly they were trying to cut corners where they could on this. And again, I don't know the budget they had. I don't know anything they had. Also, just generally, this is also kind of like the most generic D story there is. I get that this is the first story in the book, but this is literally the most generic D story there is. He shows up, there's a noble that's terrorizing some chick, and then he goes and kills the noble. Like, there's not really too much that happens in the way of things. In later stories and stuff like that, there's oftentimes like moral questions that come into play, or things aren't as easy as they once seemed. You might be stuck in a dream. I mean, who the fuck knows? But like, I just feel like this particular story, and again, I'm judging it on what the movie I've seen is, it's a fairly generic vampire story, or vampire hunter story, I should say. And it follows a ton of same tropes about like, she got kidnapped, let's go save her. This chick gets kidnapped like 3 times in this movie. I was like, yo. And the one thing that I wanted a little bit more of, at the start of the movie, she's kind of badass. She's got like an energy whip, and when she fights D,
Yeah,
she
where
like
did
splits
that
it up.
go?
She splits it up into like a Hydra whip. And I'm like, okay, you might not have been able to fight off D, but surely you can fight off like some random demons. Like, I think you got it in you. And I did want a little bit more of that from her side of things. But all things considered, I would give this movie an 82. Just because I fucking like vampires. So, my favorite scene? Ah, man, that is so difficult to choose. I'm going to have to say my favorite scene is actually the one, Nico, where she's like, take me now, D.
Oh,
And-
yeah.
You would.
And he like saved her, but then he's like, he does the whole like, and like, I think it's funny because I don't know if she picked up on it. She probably thought he was struggling with like not wanting to like, you know, do the thing, but like, really, the thing that he wants is her cardioid artery. Like, that's what he really wants.
Karate.
Cardioid is not an artery. That's a microphone,
microphone.
thing. But yeah, so he wants her blood. He wants to suck her blood. And she wants D from D. So I don't know. And she even like falls in love with him. And I'm just like, it is kind of cheesy a little bit. I ain't gonna lie. Like, this man didn't have to say nothing. So stepping back from that is what it is. But I give it an 82. So would we recommend this one?
I do, yes.
I would as well.
I don't.
What?
I'm sorry.
What? Yo, it's a lot of fucking silence. Yo. Think about the dog shit you recommended on this podcast, Nico.
Pew 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 pew.
Think about that. You fucking like ghost stories. Oh my God. Oh my God. This is a 65. 65.
I didn't even finish my sentence.
Nah, you said you can't. That's the only words I needed to hear. But go ahead.
I was fuck me, all right. I was going to say because you should go watch Bloodlust instead. Where it's everything this is, but just so much better.
Bruh, you can't say you're weak because you can't lift what you're going to lift in a year from now.
What?
Huh? Yes,
what?
actually you can.
Yes, you can.
Look, it's not hot today if snowfall next week, bro.
That no.
Yeah, it could be. What if it's
but
90
it is
degrees
hot today, and snow's not gonna fall next week.
I'm saying is this, you can't hold this up to Bloodlust. Bloodlust ain't happened yet when this movie came out. It's not really a fair comparison.
But it happened now.
Happened
it happened now.
And now is when we're reviewing it.
Yeah, we're not reviewing it back in '85.
You can't taint it.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Dan, Justin, I want to remind you of all the times that Dan has said something very akin to what I'm saying, and neither one of us have jumped at the bit.
What?
Dan, confirm.
I'm gonna remember this.
Can confirm.
Yeah.
I'm gonna remember this. Audience, I'm gonna remember this. Bro, I'm about to cut off a chicken's head and write your name in blood after this podcast, bro.
Just go watch Bloodlust. This movie's fun, but go watch Bloodlust.
Yo, audience, I can't even say that no more, bro. I can't say anything more. It's gonna be incriminating, bro. So, to my great shame and I feel like I should be like, I feel like, I don't know.
How
like,
do you think I felt when we didn't recommend Midsummer?
That wasn't on me.
Yeah, that was on Dan. And I wasn't like, oh, you know what? Fuck you in particular, Dan. I'm going to go through and raid your fridge, Dan. I'm going to go and, like, replace the car in your gas with, mayonnaise in your, fuck you, Dan.
You were pretty much just like, damn, that sucks. But I understand.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's true.
You.
That's true. You're right. No, you're fucking not. Fuck you, Nico. I'm gonna remember this to the day you die, bro. All right. So, I'm sorry, audience. That was just me saying that we didn't recommend Vampire Hunter D from 1985. Yeah, we didn't recommend that. So it's not gonna get the golden seal. It's not gonna get the Bolden seal. It's not happening. So, any last words before we bring this one to a cease?
Yeah, I'm gonna go open a life insurance policy real quick.
You know what I did notice?
Oh, what's that?
Count Magnus Lee.
Uh-huh.
Lee.
Lee.
Christopher Lee.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Yep. I think
That's
they
dope.
purposely did that to honor Christopher Lee as Dracula. Obviously, Magnus Lee is not Dracula, but, you know.
Oh, there was another thing like that, though.
Oh, yeah?
Greco.
Who's Greco-Roman?
You know what? His name is Greco-Roman.
Is it really?
Yeah, his name is Greco-Roman.
I didn't know that, actually. Huh. He wasn't very Greco-Roman, was he?
No, it wasn't. Not at all.
It's like naming a white guy. Yeah, my name is Indus River Valley.
Don't give anybody any ideas, Nico. So, any last things besides that, Dan? Nico? Anyone?
Nah.
All right. Well, audience, if you disagree with Nico and you think that he needs to receive a well-worded and polite yet firm rebuttal of his ideas, please drop us a line. We're on Twitter and Instagram at DOTD Horror. We're also on Facebook. Don't open that door. But until then, that's been it from Dan, Nico, and a very angry Juss. Keep yourself safe. If you get in trouble, you might need D. And as always, dear listener, don't open that door. Bye. Wait, you can't be. Are you?